Okay, so my name is Nicola. As I mentioned, I'm the Community Engagement Officer for the Transform in the Trent Valley project. So this is a map of our scheme area. We are focused on the River Trent, as you might have guessed from the name. We're funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund for a 5-year scheme, and we're just coming to the end of our 2nd year. You can see our scheme area here in purple, so very focused on the River Trent and its tributaries. So this is the River Dove coming past Uttoxeter and the River Tame here from Tamworth. So the river, its tributaries and its floodplains, that's really our key area that we're focusing on. We cover both Staffordshire and Derbyshire, and so about 60% in Staffordshire and 40% in Derbyshire. The scheme is led by Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. They're the main grant holders, but we're a partnership project. So there's lots of different organisations involved in this project. So I'm employed by Support Staffordshire. We run some of the projects. We also have a staff member from Derbyshire Wildlife Trust. We have other delivery partners such as Canal and Rivers Trust, the Trent Rivers Trust, but we also have a number of supporting partners as well. So they don't deliver anything for us, but they sit on the board, they provide guidance and support for the project as a whole as well. And that includes people like the Environment Agency and some of the industries in the area as well. So for example, tarmac and aggregate industries are supporting partners. So within the scheme as a whole, there are 16 separate projects, and these cover a really wide range of topics and issues as well. So for example, we've got children and family outdoor activities, school engagement, a lot of volunteering opportunities. We are putting in a long distance footpath along the River Trent. We're looking at cycle routes, improving canal towpath and improving access to the area and across the landscape. Habitat improvement works, improving the biodiversity, river restoration and cultural heritage projects as well. So looking at some of the built heritage and the history. So there's a really wide range of projects come together to make the Transform in the Trent Valley scheme as a whole. So that is a very brief run through of the Transform in the Trent Valley scheme. I know some of you had heard that before. If you are interested, then you can find out a lot more information on our website, which I'll share in a feedback email tomorrow for you. So the last thing for me to say is just to say we have got more talk coming up. If you'd like to book onto any of these, then it's just on the Eventbrite page that you booked onto this one as well. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen and I'm going to hand over to Adam Peacock. So Adam is from Keele University. He's involved in the Zero Carbon Rugeley project, and he will be able to explain everything much better than I can. So I will be quiet and I'll hand over to Adam.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Yeah, pleasure to be here this evening, everyone. Thank you to Transforming the Trent Valley for the opportunity to be here. I have to say I'm quite enjoying the captions at the bottom, which just declared that I'm from Keele University, but I'm not. I'm from Keele University. We are one of the Staffordshire universities, and I'm a postdoctoral research associate within the Institute for Sustainable Futures, and that basically means I research sustainability stuff, as myself and my colleague Zoe like to declare. Just as a forewarning, I have another screen here, so I'm not looking away from you, and some notes here. So if I'm looking in weird directions, it's just because I'm just checking that I'm covering all the right bases. So I think first things first. This is probably a slightly different talk to some of the other ones on the agenda. But you know, we are really delighted to be here this evening, and it's something I've been looking forward to for a while. I can see some familiar faces that have turned up this evening, so it's great to see you again, and it's always a pleasure to meet new people from the Rugeley area and surrounding areas. So in this session, firstly, I'm going to start by setting the scene, provide a bit of a background to Zero Carbon Rugeley, why we think it's important, where it sits within the government's kind of action plan towards a net zero future, and sort of talking about the wider context of things. we also wanted to use it as an opportunity to sort of start providing some insights that we've collected. We've got a really strong focus on community engagement, and I'll kind of explain those principles and why they're important to the project. But you can start to see how engagement with the community is shaping our thinking. And then obviously at the end as well, after a short break to feed the cats, there's the opportunity to ask us some questions as well, and sort of go over anything that we might have missed. So I think really before we get into what Zero Carbon Rugeley is specifically, we need to start thinking about why we're here in the first place. So we're talking about carbon really is the focus of our project, Zero Carbon Rugeley. The carbon means we're talking about climate change, we're interested in climate change. And the UK really is an international leader in carbon reduction. We're very much one of the first major economies to pass laws which require us to act on our carbon emissions. And the Climate Change Act of 2008 made sure that irrespective of the party in power, carbon reduction would be a legal requirement. It is our duty to work towards it. And then 2019, which after the year that we've all just suddenly missed from our lives, feels like only last year. But May 2019, the Committee on Climate Change, who act as an advisory council to the UK government, said that it was desirable, feasible and achievable to start working towards a target of net zero by 2050. And generally when we start to think about climate change, when we start to think about the need to get to a net zero future, it often seems unattainable. It's quite an abstract thing. We are in a really exciting time. We're living through an energy revolution and a potential green industrial revolution, or a needed green industrial revolution, is on the horizon. And so we need to figure out how we're going to get there. We need to start mapping out what the future will look like. How will our lives change? How will communities change? How will our economy change? But effectively, this needs to happen by 2050. Now, in an ideal world, this would be happening a lot sooner. We need to start acting now. And as the sort of chairman of the Climate Change Committee, I absolutely love this quote. The science demands it. The evidence is before you. We must start at once. There is no time to lose. Almost echoing Buzz Lightyear there at the end. But you can see quite clearly that we know that this is a problem. We know that we need to adapt. We know that we need to change the way in which we're living. On the left-hand side, you can see our emissions in the UK today. Unsurprisingly, transport is a significant, it makes up a significant portion of our carbon. Residential and non-residential buildings, industry is obviously quite substantial as well. And on the right-hand side is realistically where we need to get to, with any emissions being offset. So when we're talking about net zero, that also means looking at ways in which we can similarly reduce emissions and extract emissions as well. We've got a long way to go, I think it's fair to say. There is no easy way of getting to where we need to be. And it requires a collective action. It requires a concerted effort from everybody across every sector and every aspect of our lives. But it is urgent. And we have seen a ramping up of ambition recently from particularly the UK government, and now hopefully we're seeing other governments across the world following suit. This really just demonstrates the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution that was outlined by the government. And you can see some of the things that they mention are very energy specific, looking at energy predominantly. So offshore wind, hydrogen, carbon capture, but also looking at innovation and finance, thinking, okay, well, how do we finance this? What do we need to do differently that we haven't been doing before? You know, what is a realistic way of actually mapping all of this out? And this 10-point plan for this green industrial revolution that we're hoping to spark, also here we can see the idea is to create jobs out of it as well. So this isn't about just removing industries and getting rid of people's livelihoods, but also about the creation of jobs. So we need to think about how we upskill and reskill and get people prepared for that transition. So on the right hand side here, you can see that energy is one of the main sources of global greenhouse gas emissions across the world. Okay, so an estimation for 2016 is that global greenhouse gas emissions were 49.4 billion tons, which is just mind-blowing. It's a ridiculous amount that we're going to have to grapple with here. But you can see that from all of that, energy makes up 73.2% of that, okay? And that energy is very much around use in buildings, commercial, residential, transport, particularly road transport being a significant amount, unsurprisingly. And then also a huge part, nearly 25% of that amount of energy is around industry as well. And we can see that, unsurprisingly, iron and steel make up a significant amount. So I think it pretty clearly shows that a focus towards our ambitions on net zero, and unsurprisingly, these are what make up the government's plan, is a focus on energy. You know, energy is really at the crux of everything that we do. We're using energy right now to host this over Zoom. I'm sure we'd all rather have used energy to have got to a location to talk sustainably, I hope. But it really does underpin everything. And I think when we think about energy, we tend to think about the real environmental sustainability angle. So obviously, as I said at the start, we are worried about climate change. You know, there is a need to act. You know, given that the crazy year that we had in 2020, everyone seems to forget about the fires that happened in Australia, for example, and the flooding that happens, what recently happened in Texas. We're starting to see some crazy events, and the Texas event in particular is quite interesting because energy was a huge problem, people just losing electricity overnight. But it's not just about the environmental aspects. You know, energy security is a huge factor here. If we're not dependent on fossil fuels and we're not thinking about how we're going to secure more fossil fuels, we completely restructure the geopolitical aspects of the world we live in. You know, the negotiations that we make on an international scale to secure energy. It's about energy security is really thinking about that regularity of supply, around ensuring that when we go to do something as a society, we have the supply there necessary to do it, but in a decarbonised way. And in particular, one of the biggest problems we have when it comes to thinking about energy is around equity, which is the accessibility and affordability of energy itself. And a big part of the work that I'm interested in is looking at fuel poverty and energy poverty and thinking, in a decarbonising situation, how can we address some of that? And I think when you look at these two things together, you start to think about the complexity of what we have to do. How do you take all these individual components, be them buildings, transport, industry, waste, and start looking at how you reconfigure that system? Well, naturally, it starts with decarbonisation. That's what we're interested in. We want to reduce the carbon emissions, or at least offset as much of it as possible. But there's far more to it than that. How do you stitch all of this together? In the same time in which we're living through a green industrial revolution, we're also living in the digital age, where we've got an array of smart technologies coming to the forefront of how we live our lives. And that goes beyond just smart meters. Things like AI and machine learning, big data analytics, the fact that we can now store huge swathes of data, and that we're able to process things that we could never process before on a computing and technological front. We've never been more advanced, and it's only going to increase into the future. So how can we take those the digital world we live in, how can we take those capabilities and reorganize our energy system in a way that is more efficient and also less wasteful? But also within that, within this grid 2.0, as we call it, as we're trying to change energy systems, how can we decentralize our dependency on energy? Can we give communities the capacity to produce their own energy and to profit from that energy rather than it being wasted and put back into the grid? Can we set up community market platforms, for example, where people can produce their energy, store it, and sell anything that they don't need? Can we empower communities, really focus on that equity aspect of energy? And again, that goes back to the points around fuel poverty and things like that. So what you see here is a really important picture, but also a really exciting time. It's a change in the way in which we think about and engage with energy. The problem being education. Unfortunately, we are still coming to terms with how all of this works, how it all configures, and the wider public generally are unaware of the need for the changes and the fact that this isn't just a focus on environmental solutions, but also economic and social equity and energy security. You know, fossil fuels are running out. We know that they are finite. But we can take renewables, we can take the natural environment around us in a sustainable way and ensure that we have energy for generations to come, increasingly populous generations to come. And that really is at the heart of our interest. It's about these co-benefits. It's about what do you get from a decarbonisation scenario. Secure and affordable power for all is something that we're talking about. Power for All, a really great local community group in Rugeley as well. But mitigating conflict, that goes back to that sort of geopolitical argument that I was making around sort of water, land, thinking about some resources that we have that are becoming scarce and what we need to do. Obviously, a change to our energy system is a change to our national economy. It's a change to the ways in which local businesses operate, and it's a change to jobs and the types of jobs that we see and the creation of jobs that previously might not have existed. Within the heart of all of this is our people, what we call energy users, and the health and well-being of the people is a primary concern. You know, if it's not just about taking the energy system and people's livelihoods being compromised, but how can we increase the health and well-being of people? For example, if we drive to less places and encourage people to walk to Morrison's 5 minutes down the road, we're encouraging, you know, active travel. And those sorts of considerations can be embedded within thinking about energy systems and how they function as well. I'll get into that shortly. Freeing government resources, reducing energy imports, you know, thinking about the ways in which we get our energy and the way in which energy is produced and how we import and export energy completely restructures. But primarily at the focus of my concern and the reason I'm here this evening is around how can we take all of this and empower communities? How can we empower communities to take charge, to take control, and to start to contribute to the ways in which energy systems work? So it's very much around this citizen-driven approach. So at this point, you're probably wondering, well, where on earth does Rugeley fit into this? You know, where does this all come from? Well, as part of the government's 10-point plan comes the Energy Revolution, the Prospering from the Energy Revolution programme, which is about unlocking the potential of these new intelligent local energy systems for the UK, but also thinking about those socio-economic components as well. So there's a significant amount of money behind this. It's a £102 million programme happening concurrently across the country. Zero Carbon Rugeley fits within one of the 10 future design scenarios, okay? And what that is, across the UK at the moment, there are several locations that have been chosen to look at how we can start to take communities, take place-specific assets, and convert them into sustainable ways of doing things. So it's very much around building that template. We're trying to build our knowledge and our evidence base about how we kickstart this process. What is the most effective way to create a smart local energy system, which is what Rugeley is all about. You can see that at the top there are 4 practical demonstrators which are testing known technologies that have had extensive testing elsewhere. But Zero Carbon Rugeley is very much a design project. It's about looking at the different assets of Rugeley as a place, looking at a whole wealth of different things, which I'll talk about in a second, and making sure that we create a template for the future. And Zero Carbon Rugeley really has a focus on what we call user-centric design, which is about allowing the community to help co-produce our new energy system. Who's part of Zero Carbon Rugeley? Well, we are a consortium. I myself am from Keele University, but there are a whole array of partners involved in this. ENGIE, who are operating the power station redevelopment, also lead this consortium. And really, the reason that this project exists is the desire to extend the benefits of a low carbon redevelopment to the wider community. Why restrict it to the power station site? Why not look at the benefits for the wider community as a whole? And you'll see some interesting partners within here. We've got some that are around sort of computer engineering, Opus One, and Conidigital. Opus One sort of focused around smart energy markets. It's very much that kind of buying and trading of energy amongst communities that I was talking about. Regen focus on some of the policy aspects. Connected Places Catapult are looking at the mobility system in Rugeley and from a very sort of Rugeley specific but more relational, further afield lens. The Sustainable Housing Action Partnership are looking at existing buildings and retrofitting buildings and what do we need to do for our future building designs to be more energy efficient and sustainable, but also what do we need to do to existing buildings and what would that kind of look like in practice. Chase Community Solar, some of you might be familiar with if you're from the local area, very much involved in PV, solar panels, and sort of community cooperatives for operating those. The most surprising one on there might be the New Vic Theatre. If any of you are from Newcastle-under-Lyme or live there like myself, they're very much around narratives, thinking about place-specific narratives. They work with us on our community engagement, and if you've ever had the pleasure of attending one of our workshops, you'll know that they don't really run in the most conventional way. I'll talk about that shortly. But I think critical to outline here as well on the right-hand side of the screen is a variety of partners that you will be more familiar with: Cannock Chase Council, Staffordshire County Council, and so on, Severn Trent. And we've also sort of built up a lot of other working relationships within the community as well. And what we love about this is that they're all quite local. So most of the project partners are have local assets or are from the region itself, which is nice to use local resources or regional resources to run a project. What are we trying to do? Well, I've talked about the fact that we can use all this digitization and decentralization to change energy systems. So we are trying to design a smart local energy system for the Rugeley community, and I'll give a more precise definition of that shortly. It's a 2-year project that we started in March 2020. There's a couple of million behind it, and it aims to create sort of an innovative but also replicable, scalable energy solution and design process. So we're interested in much in how this consortium functions and the kinds of solutions that we look at as we are what the final product will look like, what the template of the design will be. And the idea is that the solutions could then be implemented, what we end up designing, by or before 2030. And you can see down the bottom some of our initiatives. So obviously we're focusing on carbon, but there's also, we're trying to focus, if we can look at energy cost reduction, any social benefits that we can get out of this, how can we sort of regenerate Rugeley as a town and a local area and boost local employment as well. And the output is effectively a large complex energy system map with varying types of solutions for commercial, residential buildings, mobility, thinking about how we can generate energy locally, what are the most effective things that we can design, thinking about how we can store energy and such. So you're probably thinking, why Rugeley? Other than the fact that it's a really interesting place. Rugeley, this very much sort of stemmed from the power station development being a flagship for potential for decarbonisation and change. but also it's a very specific type of community with a real legacy in terms of its position in energy use and energy innovation. I'd like to give a shout out to Friends of Hagley, who I've been working with, have been teaching me all about the local heritage and the local area. And Rugeley has really been at the forefront of some interesting changes over time, all the way back to its iron production, but also, you know, the power station and the mining. It's just absolutely fascinating. It's always had this sort of precursor to change, and it's very much sort of, it was at the forefront of the precursors to the Industrial Revolution as well. So it's got some really exciting heritage, and in many ways Zero Carbon Rugeley is just another layer on top of that. But also thinking about it in terms of the types of dwellings that we have, it's quite a diverse area in terms of some of the buildings that it has from an array of different eras. It's got some sort of large-scale industrial players, Tesco, Amazon being a substantial one. It naturally has, given that we're here this evening, the Trent River and the canals. It's got 2 train stations, which is quite unusual for a town of this size. Quite unique mobility infrastructure. It's quite well connected. So it's very much about this idea of zero carbon place shaping, looking at the specific character of this place. So what is a smart local energy system, or a SLES? Well, a smart local energy system is actually quite complicated. You know, when we started looking at some of those other aspects of what it's about, you know, in terms of how we're going to change all these different sectors and how things reconfigure, well, you know, there's a lot to consider here. There are lots of aspects that we could focus on. But if we break down this term, SLES, Smart Local Energy System, we can start to think about what it actually means and how it relates to the road to net zero. The smart aspect is very much about that digitization. It's about optimizing the way in which we store energy, we produce energy, and we transport energy. And it's about making sure that energy is used efficiently, that we're not being wasteful with the resources that we have. The local component is where we tie it to Rugeley. We start thinking about place-based solutions. We start thinking about what local energy generation would look like, and very much thinking about the local socio-economic context. Energy can cover a whole array of things, as we've seen, thinking about heat, power, mobility and transport. You know, the energy kind of underpins almost everything that we do. And a system then is how we bring all those components together. It is actually the delivery mechanism. It's the way in which those things configure together. They're very much the technical, but a system also comprises social elements and economic elements as well. And so it's looking at how that relationship is going to change over time, but doing so in a very integrated fashion. But overall, the purpose of a smart local energy system is this goal of decarbonisation, and that very much remains central to the ambitions of the project. In terms of what we actually do, what some of the partners do, Keele University is leading on the user-centric design component, which I'll get into shortly, with the Newvic Theatre and Chase Community Solar as well. But you can see there are varying things that we focus on: business models, mobility, buildings, retrofit and new, energy systems. But down the bottom as well, thinking about finance and investment. How can we make Zero Carbon Rugeley a reality? It is a design. It is a design process. It is a design project. But it would be nice to think that we could actually make some of it happen in the future. No guarantees with anything, as usual. But very much sort of at the forefront of our thinking. But also policy and regulation. There's no point doing any of this if it doesn't actually relate to the real world. It's not grounded in reality. But policy and regulation doesn't always necessarily meet what we need to do. So it's thinking about how things are going to change. What do we need to change in the way in policy and regulation currently work in order to make these smart local energy systems realistic? And also easier to deliver, I suspect. So thinking about some of these different components that we have, I've talked about buildings, I've talked about mobility, I won't dwell on this too long, but these kind of give you an idea of some of the things that we're looking at. In particular, something we're interested in is how could we generate energy from local assets, heat from mines and canal energy and river energy and things like that. Rugeley has these local assets. But also thinking about mobility, what does Rugeley need? Can we make sure we have the charging infrastructure in place for electric vehicles? How do we promote active travel? We're going to be running a community project on that, which actually will be starting next month. And also just looking at existing buildings and what energy solutions we can create from those. And they're very much underpinned by these varying concepts on the right hand side here. So business models, which is looking at creating a series of investable propositions, market platforms, finance and investment, again, all making this a reality, but energy users being at the center of our focus here, the Rugeley community itself being at the forefront of our thinking. Who are energy users? Well, it's anyone. Anybody that is using energy in any capacity is an energy user, so we tend to refer to them as diverse energy users. But we've kind of segmented them into these broad categories, thinking about local residents, small businesses who are also who are also local residents usually, landlords, people that own buildings, energy managers that sort of control how energy is consumed, purchased, and regulate that within the community, particularly in large energy users, people like Amazon, for example, and also community services and hubs. Working with local community groups to understand Rugeley. And we use a whole variety of approaches to engage with these energy users, which I'll get into now. But what does this really mean for Rugeley? Where has Rugeley found itself? Well, they are very much at the vanguard of this energy revolution. Rugeley is at the forefront of thinking. Everything that we learn from this project will influence national policy directions, and it will help create a template for the future about how we create sustainable communities. So I really like the saying vanguard of the energy revolution, because I just think it sounds really cool, but it's very true as well for Rugeley. And the opportunity for Rugeley primarily is to be part of the design. We are actively consulting with the community and understanding your perspective, what you think needs to change, and how we can, within our decarbonisation and smart local energy system agenda, start to address some of those needs and barriers. Which brings me to the topic of user-centric design. User-centric design is about making sure that you think about the people or the groups that are going to be using a product. It's something often used in rapid prototyping and product testing. But primarily what we're interested in is the Rugeley community, those different groups of energy users that I mentioned, and thinking about what we need to do to kind of configure this new energy system in a way that meets their needs. Well, we can't do that if we don't actually talk to the Rugeley community, understand your perspective, understand the history of the local area, and start thinking about ensuring that your thoughts, your considerations, and even your incredibly innovative ideas help inform what we do. You sort of help us co-produce this energy system. It's not just about all these external organizations coming into the community and deciding we're going to tear everything out and change everything. It's about consulting with you and having you help us on this process so that we come up with a solution together. Now, given the lovely online world, Nicola and myself were talking about this before everybody joined, that we find ourselves in, unfortunately, a lot of our engagement activity has been restricted to online. But that comes with a lot of benefits. It stops people traveling around as much, and also gives the opportunity for people to tune in from the comfort of their own home. So what are we doing? Well, first and foremost, we're listening to the community. We ask questions, we listen to the perspectives, we listen to the frustrations, we listen to people that don't necessarily believe in a decarbonisation agenda, and we try to understand, we try to think about how we educate, and also making sure that the community voice is heard and listened to. We then take away all of this you might turn up to one of our workshops. If you've ever attended one of our workshops, they're very different, but we get you up and moving. They're quite creative and participatory, but thinking about your relationship with energy. And then we take all of that and we analyze and we try to understand the Rugeley community perspective. But primarily it's about empowering. My job on this project is to make sure that the Rugeley community is heard, that the consortium listen to what you have to say, and that we design something that is Rugeley SLES, not a SLES for Rugeley. So this is very much a place-specific project. How does it all work? Well, you attend a workshop, or you talk to us on social media, or you just write to us with some thoughts that you might have. And then our workshops would allow you to take part in a load of creative exercises. They last about 2 hours, but we do tend to let people sort of dip in and out as needed. Social media kind of lets you take part at your own leisure. You can keep up to date with what we're doing. You can send us messages. And we then go away and, using some sort of academic analyses, we look at the perspectives that we're getting. We look at how many people are saying the same things, where the differences lie in understanding, perceptions in terms of community wants. And then we then come up with a series of action points, which we then provide to the consortium, who then have to provide evidence of how they're going to respond to those wants as well. So I mentioned some of the major players within the consortium, but we're also working with a variety of other local groups. So I've already mentioned Friends of Hagley and Power for All. Obviously, we're working with Transforming the Trent Valley as well, which have been absolutely incredible in supporting us. But Cannock Chase District Council, Rugeley Town Council as well, the Brereton and Ravenhill Parish Council, the Rugeley Community Centre, Brereton Millions, the Hive. There's a load of incredible community groups that have come together to work with us, to quote Motley Crue, on this long and windy road. And we're trying to meet the community on their level as well. So this was a litter picking exercise undertaken this weekend, actually, by the Hive, and you can see I wasn't able to get to Rugeley, but I went and did my bit around Keele as well, and did my litter picking. And this really, for me, shows the power of collective community action. If you think about the amount of rubbish we were able to collect between us and the impact that people coming together can make, and that's really at the heart of this project. It's at the heart of what we do. When a community come together and voice their opinions, and we all sit down and listen and understand one another, we can really make incredible changes. So what have we actually been focusing on so far? A vision for a low carbon Rugeley, some of the barriers that you think might be problematic, issues with transport, we said that was a major part of this, issues with buildings, that includes housing right the way up to some of the larger commercials, and really thinking about what does an emerging relationship with smart energy look like. How is the way in which I use energy, consume energy, going to change in the future? What would I like to see? So really thinking about that, and it's as much a sort of an educational exploration of what's going on as it is really trying to understand the community. Just very quickly, I just thought I'd show you some of the incredible information that we've collected from the community. You know, this is very much about respecting the legacy of Rugeley. It's not about erasing Rugeley's history, it's about adding a new layer, creating that almost palimpsest of layers of energy history. And we're really interested in exploring heritage and what the community used to look like, what it currently looks like, and what it could look like in the future. Some people here tonight might recognise their comments from here, but it's quite clear that your legacy is important to you, and how we can sort of use some of that to educate and inform and change and design this smart local energy system in a very Rugeley specific context. But other than that, you've got lots and lots of incredible ideas, harnessing energy from the wave energy from the River Trent, using a big wheel at the site of the old Colston mill, making our pits work for us again, ground source heat pumps, but telling us exactly where they should go, where they might work, where they don't work. You know, we've been absolutely overwhelmed by some of the input that we've had so far, and it's really helped us think about what solutions will work for Rugeley, but also where they'll work and why they might work as well. It's not just about mining and power stations. We're learning about, you know, you'll want to utilize the agricultural and rural aspects of your local community, keeping the green belt, trying to even partially regreen some areas, but also protecting and the promotion of agriculture as well. And you know, through and that's led us down a journey of looking at potential sort of biogas solutions through sort of these consultations, and we've even had local experts within the community come and offer their advice for us as well. So it's been an incredible process so far. There's lots of stuff I could go through here, and I'm happy to discuss some of the actual findings in more detail. You can see here we're learning about what the problems are in terms of transport, where the problems are, thinking about, you know, this isn't about taking away people's ability to be mobile. If anything, it's about trying to empower. It's about appreciating not everybody is able to engage with active travel, for example, and thinking about what we need to do with smart solutions in order to support those individuals as well. Obviously, nobody wants to sit in traffic and congestion, so we're actually having people highlight to us on interactive maps where the main points of congestion are, thinking about what we need to do to try and alleviate some of that within a future-facing design. And you know, how the flow of public transport needs to change. People aren't going to just stop driving anywhere if the public transport doesn't enable them. Nobody wants to cycle everywhere if it's raining, for example. So how does public transport need to be even more demand responsive or work better? So we reduce some of these interchange penalties between different modes of transport. You're also telling us things that you don't want to see. So we opened up a question on electric scooters. I quite like the bottom quote, scooters and canals don't mix. I thought it was an excellent point that we probably hadn't thought of. You know, the idea that it could be promoting unhealthy living, then not necessarily, but it's about understanding that perspective on them. And you know, our solutions have to be right for Rugeley. In terms of buildings, it's about looking at what potential opportunity there already are, green homes grants and things like that. But the way in which people perceive these changes, you know, it's insurmountable, it's overly expensive. It's about thinking about the specific characteristics of the Rugeley area. It's about understanding experiences of that. So what specific types of retrofit would work. You know the buildings better than we do. We've not, because of COVID, we've not been able to go out and retrofit them yet. So we're actually learning a lot about the buildings in Rugeley from the community's input, and sort of you sharing some of the designs of your house. So incredibly useful to engage with a community and to have such a wonderful community that actually really share with us a very honest and open, that tell us if they don't like something, and I'm not afraid to say that, but also really tell us what they want to see in the future. Your experiences and your knowledge matter and really do help shape this project. We've also been engaging with local businesses, as I said, and thinking about, it's not just about sort of the residential aspect, but also how do businesses work with emergent markets, eco-friendly products, how can we start linking local businesses together, how could we rebuild the high street in a decarbonised, sustainable way, how can we regenerate the local area through all of this work, through bringing the community together. So how do we respond? We have a very reflexive approach to this. So we try to learn from the community and what you tell us, and use that to operate the project. So people have said, oh, we're not really sure what we can do. What can we access? So we're putting together a database of sort of national policy and funding opportunities for people to access, and working about how we best disseminate those within the community. You may have seen our social media page, but we've also set up a discussion forum where we have some incredible conversations going on about other aspects of zero carbon that aren't related to a smart local energy system. They're actually, you know, things around community urban orchards and looking at afforestation and things like that, and those other aspects that are so critical to making a zero carbon initiative a success. I see Nicola smiling as well. It's very much up your street as well. But just thinking about how we can work with groups in terms of wildlife corridors and things we need to do with green spaces that we can do to support a project like this. It all links together at the end of the day. We're really beginning to understand what we need to do in order to create warmer, more comfortable homes, and understanding what some of those existing problems are and the complexities of a retrofit process. And we need to do more work with local businesses really to ensure that the smart local energy system we design can benefit them as well. But at the end of the day, this is about you. This is about the Rugeley community. And I absolutely love this quote. I'm happy to say I was on the first of the workshops. I found it uplifting knowing that local voices would be heard. I represent no set group, no business, no political power. I simply want better for my family and my community. And I think at the end of the day, that's really what the project is all about. Can we design a new, sustainable, decarbonised community? So we'd love to hear your views. If you are a Rugeley resident or a local interested party, please do get in touch with us. It means the world that we've got as far as we have, and we're always interested in learning from individuals. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and any kind of anyone that is inquisitive or anyone that wants to know more about what we're doing or has something to contribute, we'd love to hear from you. Help us shape the design for your community. I'd also like to take this point, I've left exactly the right amount of time, to mention our community ambassador program. So I know a couple of them are here this evening. Our community ambassador program is very much a way for people to get involved within the Rugeley community. So they're individuals that are interested in promoting the project and making sure that we are as inclusive as possible, thinking about ways to capture the voices of those that might struggle to voice their opinions on the project. And also, and that really helps us make sure that everybody has a chance to shape the smart local energy system. So I believe a couple of them might be here this evening. Is Jen here? Hi Jen, do you want to say hello?
Hello. So I'm Jen. I am Jennifer Sargent. I live in Rugeley, not born and bred, I'm sorry, that's not my fault. But I live in the community. I have 2 young children. I was on one of the first talks that Adam did, and I found the whole thing very inspiring. From there, Adam asked me to get engaged in becoming a community ambassador, and I've just come along again just because I think it's very important that we look to how we can shape our future. And if we get the chance to have our voice and have our say in the local community about actually something that's genuinely, truly important that goes beyond us as individuals, I think that's what we have to do. So hence my part in the thing to try and encourage other people to put their voices forward too.
Brilliant, thank you, Jen. Thank you very much. Anybody else here? Judith?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, Adam. Yeah, I was on some of the first workshops with Jen. I live up at Etching Hill, lived in Rugeley for 27, 28 years now, a Stokey by birth, passionate and have been for a long time about zero carbon, renewable, sustainability. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for Rugeley to take part in something that hopefully will become bigger than Rugeley. So yeah, I think it's a great opportunity for us to have a think about what we might like to happen.
Brilliant, thank you very much. For some reason the participants list on my video is frozen, so I can't see if any of the other ambassadors are here with us. But hopefully that gives you a taster of the fact that there are people within your community engaging with us and working with us and really making sure that everything that I do has that real community-centric lens to it. So it's been, that sort of signals the end of my talk really, gives everyone a bit of extra time to make a cup of tea. But thank you so much for coming along. It's been a real pleasure to present this to you today, and I really look forward to any questions that you might have. So thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Adam. I knew some of that. I knew kind of the overarching kind of what Zero Carbon Rugeley was all about, but it's so good to have it all in one place and explained, and just to see the process and how far you've got in terms of talking to the community and getting all of the insights and information from them. So yeah, thank you